Wreck. It's wrecking. All right, Ricky Ruse. Here we are. It's a Saturday night. Welcome to the PARAcast. I'm your host, Tomas the Boss Fernandez. There's one time I don't like to do this. It's on a Saturday night. You know what I like to do on a Saturday night? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Joining me tonight.
Well, that's kind of like this show. Nothing.
Your local soccer league has a picture of him, and it says, "This man is not a referee." It's Robert Wyatt.
Hey, I'm just trying to help the kids.
He's throwing.
Would you like to come see my soccer balls?
He's throwing yellow cards and flags and everything, and throwing his belt and his socks and anything else he can get his hands on. And back from the dead, he has no quit in him. The people's champ, the board's bane, YeeMin Lin.
Gentlemen, thanks for taking the time tonight.
Hey, well, we had to get it done tonight so we could still have you around for. Well, you got to take off tomorrow, so we'd figure we'd do this. And so, the big news, I guess we'll start with that first. Is well, you kind of ran. You got the majority of the votes in the USPSA presidential election by like what 100 and something votes.
Something like that. 3% of the total voting votes.
And then you pulled Area 6 in on the coattails, so well done there.
That was not planned at all.
I don't think anybody planned that, but well done, Ben Berry.
Yeah, great job. We're very happy that Ben is now Area 6 director. Well, will be January
100%.
1.
Well, we'll see. He's got to go through the runoff with Kyle Stevens. So
yeah, both two good people.
So we'll spend some more money just like we did last year to run 4 elections.
And so,
hey, if USPSA is good at anything, it's spending money on elections. Forget about the classifier, but they're good at election meddling, running.
Yeah, and it doesn't seem like they're good at membership retainment. That's one thing they don't seem like they're good at.
That was interesting. That was interesting. I mean, like 26,000 votes, or 26,000 eligible, down from before. Like, what happened there?
Well, I mean, you could always look at the, the number from last year to this year. If you had people that basically dropped out for whatever reason, and then anybody who basically started up a new membership, or if they let the 30 days pass or whatever was decided, then, that could be the difference right there. I mean, I think the membership numbers are still the same. It's just the number of eligible voters.
So the thing is kind of interesting. I mean, the board, you might know this because I really don't, but the board had to have, they made a thing says you have to be a member for at least a year to be eligible to vote, right?
Correct.
That was in the recent bylaws?
Relatively recent. Probably within the massive bylaws that were changed back in 2022. But here's all the bylaws we're going to change that everybody asked for.
Okay. So in the process of doing that, they said that you had to be a member for a year. Did they not take the time to think what would happen if somebody didn't renew for 30 days or something like that? Or they didn't pay attention to it? Because recently, if I remember right, they came out and said, hey, if your membership has lapsed for a little bit, renew and you're still eligible to vote.
Yeah, that was supposed to be the case. It happened roughly around the same time as my unique circumstance. So 2 days after, the finalizing of my appeal, there was a meeting held to basically say, hey, we're going to give members a little bit of grace period if they didn't immediately renew, because the discussion at the time was that, if you were basically late by a day per the bylaws, that meant that you were ineligible to vote.
So I guess the question that to me comes up is, how did the board not think this could be a reality?
Or did they want it to be a reality?
Also an effective question.
I think the last 2 years has been a very good exercise in unintended consequences.
That is probably the understatement of USPSA's history.
So I would take from that incompetence, not malice. Unintended consequences. Yes. Malice would mean intended. Remember, when terrible things happen, there's only 2 roads you can go down. It's either stupid or liar. So either you're right and it's fine, or you're dumb, or you're lying. And so That's the great road. So okay, we got.
I was hoping for the road that was revenge, but I mean, stupid or liar seems legit.
Well, that's the pure malice vote. Okay, so let's talk about your situation. We might as well hit this thing first, so that people that are joining in just to hear this. So what is the plan? So we have a couple questions, Robert, if you wouldn't mind. They're all basically iterations on the same thing. I've seen it on Instagram and on Facebook when people are talking about you having in the runoff and what people should do when considering whether or not to vote for you, because the situation still is that if you are elected and win the runoff, that you might not be able to take office because of the same situation that your RO certification was revoked.
Yeah,
Right.
I mean, the majority. So Alex Mansfield, go watch Manny Talk Shooting, fantastic program. Says, what's your strategy going into this runoff?
I think it's the same as it was last year. Basically, this is who I am. The members were kind enough to basically vote me in with the most number of votes, and it's running basically on what we were going to try to do. So there were some accomplishments that were made within the 8-9 months that I was president. Increasing communication was certainly one of them. Whatever it was that the board was trying to do as much as possible to be able to give membership the appropriate context and the reasons why. I think there was some good progress towards that in explaining, hey, this is why we're doing what we're doing as far as the budget was concerned. We had some very constructive discussions about the gear changes and the provisional division that was put out there. And I think that there was some real progress to be able to say, hey, look, these are the concerns that the members have. If we talk about limited optics and wanting to ensure that there was at least some kind of established metric, that was something I think we've talked about on the show before. And there was an implementation of that metric, 5% of activity. Even the last podcast that I was on, you had a discussion about, well, hey, why is the organization asking these questions about L10, having optics in L10 and the production capacity? At the end of the day, it's having that discussion. It's having that discussion on record. It's having that discussion for members to be able to reference and say, hey, we might not necessarily agree what the organization is doing, but at least somebody's putting a message out there that can be referenced that says, hey, at least someone's taking the time to actually explain this to us. So I think being able to communicate to the membership about what the organization's doing and why it's doing what it's doing, that's really what I'm going to be hanging my hat on.
Well, and I mean, if that's the case, I mean, so when Limited Optics came out, you announced that on your personal Instagram page, and there was comments from people. It's like, why was this not transmitted through the USPSA Instagram page or whatever social media? So is the communication from the organization, is it going to be more inclusive through that USPSA format? And if that's the case, then is USPSA going to unban all of the people that they banned off of their Facebook page and other things? Because if that's how they want to promote their message, you know what I'm saying?
No, I totally understand. I mean, we were actually working towards that, when events sort of overran the current situation in terms of, once you release the meeting minutes, working with Jake to bring back the USPSA podcast, something under the organization's formal messaging outlets. As far as social media is concerned, I mean, that is something that any incoming president would essentially have to work with the board on, because, well, for better or for worse, social media is, as far as we all understand, is under the sole province of the director of marketing and events. And so that is going to be a project in negotiating and essentially getting a message out through someone who's basically supposed to be doing that.
So the issue is that person wasn't as communicative as you were, and you were on the forefront of doing it on your page because you couldn't do it on the USPSA official page.
They used to say one thing in the military: good initiative, bad judgment. Once we waived confidentiality. I was very focused on getting a message out, regardless of what methodology was utilized. I can certainly acknowledge that not everything I did while I was president was, there was a lot of good initiative, bad judgment involved, and so I wanted to get the message out as soon as possible. And it was a learning moment to go, okay, we are working within the auspices of USPSA, so you can have the message constructed, but there are certainly ways to get that out that should have been followed.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
I thought it was fine. I liked it the way you did it.
Yeah, I was a happy camper. It didn't bother me, but I know that some people were asking the question, and it's a fair question to ask.
You mean two people were asking that question?
Well, yeah, but nobody likes Danny Minter anyway.
I did not. I don't know what you're talking about, sir.
I know nothing.
Yeah, that's just kind of a dumb problem. So the question still stands. Like, what is the plan going forward with your RO certification? Like, how do we if you get elected, how do we make sure that you are elected, and what steps what avenues are there available to get that taken care of?
Well, I think the first thing to think about is, any USPSA member that's going to be participating in the voting process, that really should be something that is set aside. We don't generally tend to vote on our political analysis of the situation. There's a little bit of that's involved. I think a good way to look at the situation, should I be reelected, is, you're basically starting all over. Right. So the RO discipline appeal process, as was stated in the on the website, that was followed. There was a process that was put in place. We can talk about whether that process was
above board,
done in good faith, above board, but
no, it wasn't.
Well, Tommy, at the end of the day, there was a decision that was made. That decision was executed, and now we're basically starting a little bit like the way it was when the Area 4 director had to basically get his RO certification after the fact. So, my RO certification has been revoked, and there was a motion by the board to basically allow me to reapply for that RO certification if I were to be reelected. And so I would hope that the same consideration that was given to the Area 4 director when it was found out that he didn't have an RO certification, that would be my approach. Hey, we're starting back over from square one. At the end of the day, I am basically asking for something that's outside the bylaws. It's not something that we've really had the opportunity to address. So we're starting back over again. Hey, there was a decision that was made. I've had to deal with the consequences of that decision. Okay, now we're starting over, and let's see how we can make this work.
So in that process, you're going to be going up against a bit of a different board than you had before, because let's see, Ted is now the president. Russell Fortney, by all accounts, is probably going to be put in as the area 7, area 8? I always mess that up.
Area director. So he is the incoming area director. There is precedence. So Matt Hopkins was brought in early as the area 3 director when he was initially elected. But we'll see how the board meeting goes this Tuesday.
Right, and so based on that, if they were to vote no, that would mean that Area 2 Layton would take over. So by all accounts, Area 2 should recuse themselves from the vote on that, right?
That would be a logical assessment of the situation.
Yeah, I mean that seems logical. I mean, because why would you allow the person who's gonna have some kind of financial motive to vote no? Because if he votes no and keeps you out, then he'd stand to make a lot of money. So I mean, that seems like that'd be logical.
You mean the $50,000 part-time position? I mean,
yeah,
that's a ton of money.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Listen, if anybody decides to give me $50,000 for hanging around on the internet and going to some meetings, I will be glad to pick that money up. I'm not above that, and that's why I'm a dirty union member who's waiting for a contract. So the assurances is well, let me just ask this question. So in your you were what would we do, Robert? The right in appeal to get you on the ballot for the election, and then since you are on the ballot for the election, you have some assurances that the board, as if you are elected, the board will let you have another run at an RO certificate and waive your year, or is that a gray area, or I don't know, or yet to be determined, or for sure?
I think the discussion we had about the voter eligibility, I think that particular logic applies to this situation as well. So you put it in there, and then once something actually comes to pass, then, well, such is the joy of politics. So there would certainly be a discussion at that point on actually firming up, what was passed and put in the public meeting minutes about what occurs with my situation should I be reelected.
Okay. All right.
So everything you did before, that got you to this point. What did you? So I always like asking this question. What did you do right? What did you do wrong? And what are you going to do different?
I think what definitely was done right was actually trying to communicate with the membership as much as possible through whatever means necessary. Whether it was through podcasts with you guys, being on a podcast with Scott Arnberg, with Joel Park, posting things on my personal Instagram. You can argue the execution might have been done a little bit better, but the intent to actually communicate a message to the membership, I tried to do that as much as possible. I think there is certainly something could be learned with the transition. I mean, we were going from an environment where you had a president, CEO, a little bit of a God Emperor of the universe type situation, and then you had a split type situation where you have a managing director or president, and navigating those political waters of trying to figure out who was responsible for what. I think the board did the best job they could to try to spell that out within the bylaws. But then, the best laid plans of mice and men, when you get hit in the face, that ends up being something a little bit more challenging. So I think, certainly having an open line of communication to the membership, that was something I was very focused on. Having the same level of communication, explicit communication, especially with the organization, leadership, and the board. I think that was something that I could certainly improve upon. There were a lot of assumptions about what the relationship would be like when I came in, and for one reason or another, those assumptions, those assumptions were never really as overcome as well as I thought. So there was a lot of presumption on, hey, you're trying to do this, or I'm trying to do that. And it's like, okay, I don't know where you're getting this from, but it was out there.
Sure.
If nothing else, that the 9 months I was in, it was a very interesting learning experience. It was not. I think that's part of I think that's really a message for the membership, is that it's not. It definitely wasn't the same as it was when Mike Foley or Sherwin was the president, and there's not really a whole lot of context for how this functions, because we really haven't had a president managing director relationship since Phil Strader, Kim Williams, and so there's a certain amount of learning new territory. So for anyone to say that, hey, they know this exactly how this is going to work, I can tell you it was very contentious, to say the least.
Sure.
And so that contention will most likely pop in with almost any USPSA president you kind of see going in there.
I would imagine so. Again, you're going from an environment where you had someone who could fairly strongly dictate the direction the organization was going. I knew that it was going to be more of a collaborative relationship. The president being the voice and being the representative of the members as per the bylaws. And but it was a little bit more contentious trying to get not necessarily a president, CEO, and 8 board members who are just there, and having 8 board members who genuinely want to do what's best for the organization and to be able to express their voice in a way that they might not have been able to before. So that's going to be a challenge regardless.
Sure. So, I mean, knowing all that, I mean, and what you came out of, what is your plan to mend those fences and push that agenda forward? Because you are going to have 2 new board members who may or may not be more, let's say, open to your idea and your message. And so even still going into that, you've got to, I mean, assuming you get elected,
I would use like adjectives like fair and honest. Go ahead though.
How are you going to what are you going to do differently to mend those fences?
I think the first thing is really getting the new board members to understand kind of the history and context. I think that was there was some progress made towards that with Frank and Scott. It's one thing to be able to campaign and look at the outside and say, hey, this is everything I think that we should be doing based on what information you're getting, whether it's from social media or through the rumor mill. And it's another thing entirely when you're now in a position of authority and you have to function within the restrictions of the bylaws. You have to function within the restrictions of Robert's Rules of Order, not to be confused with the one and only Robert's Rule.
There's only one Robert's Rule.
So there's definitely some education I think that is useful, especially leading up to when the Area 6 and Area 8 directors, would take over, that says, hey, look, this is all the history that's gone on beforehand. This is how the meetings should be run. These are the ways to properly conduct business within a parliamentary setting. And there's another part to, I would say being a little bit more, being maybe a little bit less, being a little bit more realistic about what can actually be accomplished. It is a nonprofit organization. It is a board-driven organization. There are a number of different ideas and initiatives that are going on. So from the president's perspective, being able to say, hey, look, if we can focus on just being able to properly communicate, what the organization is doing on a regular basis, even if it's doing something on a town hall basis, right? I mean, that being able to do something like that and then keeping things a little bit more realistic and achievable. I think that's something to just show, hey, we're not just coming into a situation where we're trying to conduct a massive change in the organization, which wasn't the intent even when I first ran, but just to say, hey, if we can at least get to the point where the membership knows, hey, this is what the organization is doing, this is why it's doing it, this is the context. I think that's a more realistic, achievable goal than to say, okay, I mean, there were a lot of things when I came in that I thought, okay, well, we could do this, we could do this, we could do that, and enthusiasm and trying to change some of the things that I think we've talked about over the years about what we can do better. All that can be done with the best interest in mind, and it can come across as it can come across as confrontational even when there was no confrontational intent.
Well, and if that's the case, then how do you resolve that? Because in the sense of like being a boss, I know how you resolve that. But I mean, in the presidential situation where the president in USPSA effectively their position has almost gotten to the point of being a figurehead. What I mean, what options actually are available to you as the president?
Really, it's the interpersonal relationships. I mean, that was the situation that existed when I was president at Richmond Rod and Gun Club. You still, you basically find those areas that of common interest, and really understanding that yes, the president has a little bit more time. Is supposed to have a little bit more time. It's supposed to be the national representative of the membership for the bylaws. But it doesn't necessarily mean that the president has to do everything by themselves. And I can definitely understand, again, in the enthusiasm and the interest of trying to serve the membership, certain actions could have come across as, well, you're threatening my livelihood. Again, that maybe that has to be a little bit more explicit. But also just coming across and saying, hey, a board member can do this, or, hey, do you mind championing this particular cause? Every board member is going to come in wanting to do certain things, right? I mean, Scott came in and he was very much focused on the financials. And sometimes
if Ben Barry wins, he's going to come in very focused on making it all staff reset matches from now on. Not saying he's wrong.
Well, I mean, maybe he can hire Tom, to be the union steward for USPSA ROs.
Nothing's getting done.
It's going to raise our match fees.
Match fees through the roof. Nothing gets done, and it's always lunch break.
Yeah, USPSA run by the Teamsters. That sounds like a match made in hell.
It'll still run. It'll run great. Yeah, well, any elected official goes in there with a certain amount of things that or an agenda that they wish to get done, and that they have they feel like they have their mandate to go out there and be successful with. But there is the level of animosity which was apparent on the board about anything changing or anything new. I think Scott and Frank have run into that quite a lot, and you kind of see how the voting shakes down on a lot of the issues. And I think, well, how would I say this? I think stacking the board ever so slightly and getting a more and more of a neutral balance there might be advantageous to everybody. But that is the position, no matter who goes in there is going to have to deal with.
Well, the question that I have is, I mean, if the employees of USPSA are concerned about their livelihood, then that and somebody like stepping into their job description, that would then assume that the USPSA employees and all the membership or all the people that are involved with the organization have a job description somewhere. And if that's the case, then is that something the membership can actually look at? And so that, I mean, because from our perspective, it'd be really nice if as a member, I could look at all the employees and all the employees' descriptions, their job descriptions, and be like, oh, this is who I need to send information to, so that I'm not sending it to somebody else. I mean, it seems like that's something that would make sense, right?
You would not be illogical.
Fair enough.
If that information were actually available somewhere, but that again is a question for the current leadership.
Well, I do have a question. Maybe you could actually help me. I'm not entirely sure what to do on this one. We have a member here in our Utah section that they're requesting to have their classification downgraded, and that's correct. Per the bylaw. I mean, per the rules, you can do that. We sent in information about 5 months ago to I believe it was the director of IT that handled all this, and we've yet to hear anything. So as a member, and in my case a section coordinator, trying to assist my section members in having something take place, which hasn't happened in 5 months, what would be the next step for a section coordinator or a member if the organization hasn't responded back to them?
Well, the next thing would be to include your area director. There was a situation while I was president where you had a section coordinator in Area 1 go through that same process. You include your area director on the conversation. Technically, they're the next person up the leadership chain. You would also I would also recommend including the president of the organization as well as the managing director.
In this case, Ted Murphy and Donna
Webb.
Donna Webb. Okay. Okay. I'll let my section coordinator know that. Robert, do that. Okay, thanks, Robert.
Or you could just send it to board at USPSA, as we found out. Everyone
I don't want Troy to respond.
Everyone gets that email.
I mean, it is a valid concern. It should at least merit some sort of response, even if it's a, hey, I'm still working on it. And I think there's been some discussion with a couple other members. At the end of the day, the president is supposed to be the national member, the national representative for all the members. So to a certain extent, the buck stops with the president. So there is a legitimate question of, okay, if you're supposed to be getting these services from the organization and you're not getting it in a timely manner, where is the path for remediation? Where is the path for accountability to be held?
Sure.
That leads back to the communication, Brad. Like, you're very good at communication, getting ahead early on stuff, and then people were bitchy about that. The other thing is, like, you don't have any firing capability for employees of USPSA. So it's like damned if you do, damned if you don't. It's like they don't do your job. You go do more job. Then they're like, no, don't do this. You're stepping in on my territory, and it's just like, well, I can't fire you anyway, so how am I going to take money out of your pocket? It's this ever loop circle. So like the only way through this is like, you go there, you go do you go do what you're doing, because honestly, no matter how kindly things are done and an effort of working with each other as a team, it's politics. It ain't a team. So my two.
I think we should have a union contract. I nominate you to be USPSA steward.
Yeah, good. Let's start with new employees.
How are you going to work with the people that voted to remove you, that made those decisions? Because you're going to have to deal with them again. And so knowing that's a hard thing to be able to. I mean, I know personally, if somebody did that to me, I'd have a real hard time wanting to have that person around. But you'll be the president. How are you going to work with them?
What's the line from The Godfather? It wasn't personal. It was just business. And at the end of the day, it's politics. Politics is business.
Sure, I get that, but everything's personal.
It's only personal if you make it personal.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, you
that's fair.
You have to move on and work within the rules, and I think everyone's now aware of what rules can be applied to them to get them removed from office. And so, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on you.
Hey, it's on the meeting minutes for July 25th, so I'm sure that will be addressed.
Yep. No, so good. We have any other things you want to bring up before we hop into some other questions? Or we get to talk about stuff we've done? I've done some stuff.
Well, you guys definitely did some gun-related stuff. Look, at the end of I'm really happy to see, at the a very robust election cycle. You had some very strong candidates for president, and it really came down to the wire on who was going to be the top two. There's still
I mean, honestly,
good
two great
participation.
people.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, I mean,
but let's look forward to see how hot it's going to be at Utah State in about a month.
It'll be warm. Not probably as warm as it is now. Consistently over 100 degrees this week. But yeah, I think we're in good shape no matter how the presidential election turns out. Like, of course, on this podcast we hope for you, and we hope that everything gets remedied and that you're able to move on and go through. But I think everyone will be in good hands. Anywho's, gun stuff, fun stuff, everything that's fun. PDP. I bought the optics plate, and I was I wouldn't say it's forced, but it's the only optics plate that will do a Delta Point Pro, was the CHPWS optics plate. And what would you say, that their reputation for customer service and plates is either stellar or not stellar, depending? But So it's an aluminum plate. Are you guys familiar on how they do their plate systems?
No, but generally
But
aluminum is trash.
yes,
But is this
aluminum
going to
on
be better?
steel equals not good.
Okay, so how normally how a normal plate would go, that they had set in the plate, and then your screws from your optics go into the plate, right, and the screws from the plate into the gun itself, and so that's why you want aluminum. Underneath these things, so what it has is it has two cutouts, and then it has these two T-posts, and these two steel T-posts, you sandwich them, so it has like a post underneath, you sandwich them, and then it has a female end that goes up. That's actually made out of steel that the optic screws into. So that means you get this taller little post, so you get more screw engagement that goes in there, and then it sits underneath there. So with that female T-post that it's being screwed into snaps, you can just buy another one and put that under the plate. And so that's how they get out of the aluminum plate. So you end up getting a very thin plate, and for the Delta Point Pro to have the irons almost co-witness, if they were just a little bit taller, is quite pretty impressive of a situation. But it's turning out to be quite a handy gun. I was talking with Jay Beal today on Instagram about what plates do you get for this dang thing, and if you can shoot it 9/10 as fast as Jay Beal's doing, you're doing all right with yourself. So yeah, it's slowly growing on me, this stupid thing that doesn't fire out a battery because it has a bad disconnector type issue.
Well, it's a good thing you're not a copper.
Yeah, it's a good thing. It's a good thing you don't have to make no contact shot. Pacow.
Because that never happens. Ever. Ever.
Yeah, like, there's always there's a big difference from having a contact shot and having it going bang to having a contact shot and not having it go bang, which was always the thumb on the back of the slide. And I remember back in the day when the XD, because it had its little protruding, recoil spring, people would talk like it was the superior firearm because they could make a contact shot and it really wouldn't go out of battery because that extended recoil spring. And then everyone realized later that it was the Springfield XD, and they're like, never mind. There was a time when the Springfield XD was like, people were like, you XD or Glock. This was before the M&P really took off again. And before a lot of the other plastic fantastic guns, and that was literally things that people said they thought it was a legitimate competitor. It's not. The other thing I went over and I got some of those ghost holsters. The magazine pouches, the ones that you can have normal orientation, bullets out.
Ghost universal holsters.
Yeah,
and I think YeeMin runs similar one. Oh, there you go.
Yeah, and like it's pretty interesting. It's the first time I've messed around with them, and I thought like, oh, for $25 they're pretty awesome, and the little setup that they have that they'll hold the tiny little like CZ75 magazines all the way up to the Fat Boy Glock magazines pretty well. It's quite interesting. I think it's one of those things I'd recommend for people's first little set of gear, especially if they have like a universal belt and they mess around with a bunch of different guns and magazine sizes. I think they're pretty awesome. The bullets out, though, once you put them on, you do realize how wide they are compared to your standard pouches, like how far offset they are sticking out. I mean, they pop out quite a bit from the belt, but...
Yeah, but the nice thing about the bullets out generally is how your wrist angle never changes. It's very consistent as it goes through it. It's a lot easier than coming down and then twisting up, which is fine. You can do it, and anything can be trained. It's ultimately whatever you happen to like. And Steger is the one who really kind of like pioneered the idea of people using those things, and so a lot of people cottoned on to it. And I ran them both ways. It's just training. Whatever you find works, I think, is right on. A lot of people like the bullets out, and I can understand why, because it's pretty cool.
I understand the bullets out.
It makes sense when you had to do production and carry like 6 pounds on you. But
yeah,
now
you only have one reload.
Right, so less of an issue.
Yeah, and since I can put that mag all the way up front, and I have the Henning magazine pouch magnet thing, that it's one reload and I'm done.
Yes, but Tommy is not a rich like you, so he has to go with the slightly more budget version.
Yeah, I'm literally going with one. I have one of these. I have another Dominate defense belt, and I'm literally like, I'm just gonna put a hanger on that, and I'm gonna put those pouches on it, and that way, no matter what gun I attach to the hanger, like the pouches are pretty much set. A little flat screw to take out some of the tension.
That's actually a really good idea, Tommy.
It just works. I mean,
Yeah.
you go to having the, like, I have my precision holster stuff. Use promo code PARA10 for save 10% off for like the Glock, and like that's great. They don't make a Walther holster, and they don't make, you know, the pouches for the Walther specific magazines, and so I just have that set up there, and we're gonna see how it goes. And if I want to shoot a Beretta, I can shoot a Beretta, and if I want to shoot anything else, I'm perfectly well off of doing it. So I think it's very much worth the $25 that Ghost is putting out. Ghost consistently makes fantastic products for pretty affordable prices, and that's because they use that ABS. They don't spend high money for that polymer. They use that ABS stuff and mold that. But your experience with him, YeeMin?
I transitioned. I started off first with those when I was running the CZs. When I was running production, then I wanted something that was a little bit smaller profile, so I started running these RLN pouches. I mean, they were literally the smallest profile you could get.
Somebody took a piece of Kydex and folded it over a magazine pouch, and bam, here you go.
Pretty much. I mean, I still run that, but as far as the Ghost pouches, as far as universal, I mean, when I went back into carry optics and I was trying to figure out what magazine pouches I could use, I still had the Ghost pouches. So they're very useful in terms of you can pretty much use them for whatever, right? All you have to do is just, you know, the lighting's really terrible here, but you can see
The
you
white,
might be able to.
Yeah, the white plastic screws.
The white screw, but then there's also a leaf spring that goes in there to kind of help with that. So, I mean, as far as a universal pouch that you can use regardless of what system you're using, for double stack magazines. I mean, obviously for single stack, it's a little bit different, but I think I'm the only one that's still special enough that actually enjoys shooting that.
Oh, you and Sean Edmonds.
I like shooting single stack. I just don't like shooting single stack 1911s. So I'm not allowed in. I'm not allowed in the club because I want to shoot a double action single stack 45, or I just want to shoot a double stack 45. That I only want to put 8 rounds in the magazine, but we can't have me in that sport. So talk about your changes, and I don't want to play in limited 10. So don't bring it up. Don't bring it up.
Oh, we would never put you in that category, Tommy. Although, yeah, that's not really much of an advantage shooting an HK 45 in single stack.
No, it wouldn't. Or a SIG P220. What's everyone afraid of? Like, I'm very much happy with the IDPA CDP division. I always think that's the finest.
I too was happy.
Yes,
IDPA the one time I shot it.
Because you shoot 45 and then you just say whatever goes. Put 8 rounds in the mag. I know that we have to. The only way we can tell a gun's empty if the gun locks back. I know.
Yeah, but you know, like the stupid thigh strap rule, USPSA loves its traditions. And single stack is it's a tradition, and it'll always have that little place where it belongs, and that's And right or wrong, good or bad, I mean that's
granddad beat his kids, grandpa beat his kids, dad beats his kids.
Well, no,
tradition.
No, dad didn't beat his kids. It was Vietnam wasn't so good for dad.
It wasn't so good. Tradition. We're all Tevye. Just trying to get through our lives. Someone's buying a sewing machine. What the hell is this? Robert.
So Sean last week, he sent me a link to CDNN was actually unloading the Ruger LCP 22 threaded barrel kits for it was like $69, $75 shipped. And I'm like, I kind of wanted one of those things.
The Assassin Blaster, the 22 suppressed.
Yeah, that thing. It came in. It was like Tuesday, Wednesday, and I came home. I saw the thing. And I'm like, oh sweet! So I grabbed the LCP and I pull it apart, shove that thing in, throw the suppressor on there, walk in the backyard, pop, 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 pop. I'm like, yes, I love this very much. This is a great gun. And so now I have an LCP that's only slightly less worthless.
At least you got one that works. A lot of people didn't get an LCP 22 that works. Unfortunately.
I don't know what to say about that. I have put almost the only things that I could not reliably get to cycle was these things called 22 short. And I don't think those would cycle in a semi-auto because they're so dang tiny. But everything else would, like the quiets, the subsonics, it all ran.
Well, that's just 22 life. Like I always find it quite surprising when people find out that their 22 doesn't work reliably all the time, and it's just like, yeah.
Yeah, The worst 22 pistol I have ever owned in my life was a Walther.
Oh yeah,
and it was basic. I don't know who knocked off who, if Ruger knocked off them or they knocked off or whatever, but the Ruger, what was it, the SR22 was great, fantastic. I mean, that thing will eat anything under the sun. The Walther, which functionally looks identical to it, will eat nothing. And well, so I don't know.
We have a 2245 and we have a Beretta M9 22. It's not the conversion kit; it's the ground up M922.
Oh, sure.
The 2245. I mean, it's quite possibly known to be one of the best 22 handguns that's out 100%. There. And 100%. it chokes 18 times more often than that Beretta does. That Beretta soaks up any ammunition, shoots anything possible.
Wow. Well, that 2245 will eat anything.
Like a Gila, like the 2245 have a little problem with the Gila. You put that over there, you get the Remington soft points. The Beretta just eats that stuff up. Like that Beretta M9, besides having a 22-pound double action, because it's a 22, it's quite an amazing little shooter. Free gun.
Yeah, for me, if the 22 will cycle Thunderbolts from the Remington Thunderbolt, that has always been for me like the test, because that's generally by a lot of people considered to be some of the more junky ammo. But I have like tens of thousands of rounds of Thunderbolt, and so if it's going to run, then it'll run in that, and I love it for that.
Wait, does Remington make any ammo that's not junk?
Thunderbolt, because it runs for me. That's all I care about.
I'm trying to think if they do make anything that's not junk. What was that word? Did Remington make that steel stuff, or was that Winchester who made that steel? Remington steel, or was that Winchester steel? That was the worst. Winchester's got the range. They can play both ends of the spectrum pretty well. Remington, I think well, no, because Federal makes better buckshot than Remington does. Yeah, I think Remington's pretty much.
Well, they're all under the same umbrella company now, so.
Yeah, Remington's the budget brand. Oh, I gotta show you guys something that my son got. Hey, Mike. Bring me your Mark IV.
Ooh.
So tell this little story. My son found this thing on a Chinese website, and he was like, "I'm gonna get this thing." And so he takes his 14-year-old money at the time, and he spends 90% of it on ordering something from China. And 6 months later, like I've a couple times almost like disputed the charge. Like we're not getting this thing, and he's like he called it his scam gun for a while, but here is a Mark IV. Here, show him. No, you know how to run it. Here, you come in the camera.
Wow,
you show him how to.
303 Brit.
So it's got.
Wait, you can buy that on Amazon now?
It's not on Amazon. It's a special Chinese website.
I want to know this Chinese website.
It's pretty cool.
Wow.
Oh my gosh, that is awesome.
Whoa.
Yeah, it cycles. It's got brass cases and everything, and you get plastic cases.
Oh my gosh, that is sick.
He should be pretty happy because his dad is me. So his brass cases are a little bit too long, so they don't like to chamber. So we still got to go to their chamfer, deburr and cut them down a little bit. But it holds 7 rounds, so almost 10. It feeds from the stripper clips, and then it's got a pretty decent little trigger. It does have the spring action,
well,
so like
it should, because
it kind of wants to pop
the 303
back.
British was, I mean, the trigger on the British was amazingly good. I don't know if it was as good as, gosh, what was the German?
The Mauser.
The Mauser.
The Mauser. I don't know if it was as good as the Mauser trigger, but it was still amazingly good for that gun. And the 303 British is still, the Enfield is still my one of my most favorite guns in the world. I have the Savage Mark IV, which apparently is unusual because it was one of the Enfields made in America.
It's still got the safety. It is $200.
Cool.
You can get a real one for $250 some places, but you spent $200 and got that.
If you could find a real Enfield for $250, let me know. I will send you money. Buy it now.
I think that was maybe 10 years ago, pre-COVID.
Yeah. Yeah, the cheapest that you generally find Enfields these days is in the $400 and $500 range.
Yeah,
Right.
The problem is like you still got a 303 Brit, and that's just like talk about spending like $4 or $5 a shot, and you're just like, oh, here we go.
The first stuff we ever had of that, we found a bunch at one of those gun shows, and it was that weird Egyptian mill surplus stuff that you fire it, and then it would shoot.
Yeah,
it was just notoriously awful.
You guys had that issue too, where it would actually hang fire. Yeah.
Oh, horrible.
Oh,
yeah, I mean, it literally is like pull the trigger, boom, fuck, gee, mother.
Yep.
I mean, if you want to ever create a flinch, that's how you do it.
Yep. Yeah.
It's terrible.
You give someone a gun that doesn't work every time when they pull the trigger. Watch how the flinch come because they start anticipating it. Give somebody a double action that doesn't set off primers all the time, and then watch every time they pull the trigger and it doesn't set off a primer where they go.
Yeah, a lot of that stuff was super old. They were still using the cordite as the propellant. But I was lucky at the time. There was a guy in Utah that was selling brass. It was all like once fired stuff, and I picked up as like 500-600 just brass once fired cases from him, and it's just been sitting in the basement. And Brian Nelson, he actually has been really good about developing loads for some of these old bolt guns that are shooting basically subsonic, so about 1,200 feet per second ish. But you're using cast lead bullets, putting it through these rifles so you can shoot up close steel. Makes it a lot of fun. It's actually enjoyable, because trying to load for most of these guns anymore it's just prohibitively expensive.
Expensive.
Tell Eli to make some 303 bullets.
I could probably swage some of those things down and make it work, because I think those. What's the one that? Oh no, yeah. I think I could make those things work. I got a swager.
Small rifle or large rifle?
Large rifle.
Large rifle.
The hard thing with some of the older 303 cases, some of them were Berdan primed, and I thought Berdan was an American thing.
It is.
Yeah, and so
Berdan is American, Boxer is UK, but they switched.
Yeah, so it was. I'm like, oh, I'm not gonna have a problem. Clunk. Son of a bitch.
That's just two good salesmen on the opposite side of the pond, getting people to switch over at pretty much the same time. Well, right on.
Hey, we actually have a new semi-automatic pistol on the California roster now.
And what do you guys get?
The SIG M17.
Oh, great.
I know, but it actually got
the more
added
important
to the
thing
roster.
is, when does your roster get ruled unconstitutional?
Good question.
So can you
Cases
get
are still going.
Can you get a regular P320 or just the M17?
I think it's just the M17. So
not like either one of those would be like a huge win for anybody. I mean, that's like I don't know. It's like being being asked to make sure if there's a fire in the school that you kick the blind kid, like you grab the blind kid and make sure he gets out alive. That's kind of like getting the M17 on your roster. Like I know some people enjoy it, and at least you could buy a different frame and put it on the M17 top. I own one for a year and a half, and initially I was enamored with it, and then it just kept being itself, and so it's no longer with us.
I'm just surprised a new semi-automatic pistol was actually added to the roster. No microstamping.
Why did it get added? Because the military?
I honestly don't know. I just somebody said that, hey, this got added, and I don't think anybody expected a new semi-automatic pistol to be added, because the whole, hey, microstamping is totally viable, and any new firearm that needed to be added had to have microstamping capabilities.
Well, maybe SIG's actually throwing their money around and then putting it in the States like that, because there is one thing that you notice with those guns that are on the handgun roster that ship in those 10-round capacities, is that they generally have a pretty $150 more of an asking price than anywhere else in some of those, like even 15-round guns. just because of that thing. Like if you look for SIG SP 2022s, you'll find very few of the 10-round ones, and they'll generally be going for about $650 instead of like the 15 rounds in the Free States going around for $475 or something like that. So yeah, you will definitely find those going around. Like look for those SIG P226 with Mark 25s with 10-round magazines. Those fetch a pretty decent price too.
Yeah, and I think that's about what they're going to be sold at is $650. So yeah.
Great.
We had one quick question.
Sure.
From Doug Dalsky. Doug, I hope you're feeling good, dude. I'm sorry about the cancer. But he said, if you couldn't shoot or dry fire for a month, what can be done to stay mentally engaged?
There are plenty of free training videos that would be on. I would get like Charlie Perez's book. I'd get a Ben Steger book. I would read those to kind of sit there and prime and change the way that you're thinking about stuff. The other thing, like if you don't think about like the dry fire, I would work, if you had a gun and you had to lay down in bed or sit on a couch and you could at least hold a gun up, I would do a simple drill of putting up 2 pieces of tape somewhere and pressing the trigger twice while looking at 1 piece of tape, moving your eyes, then moving the gun, and then doing that again. And separate the ordering of firing 2 shots and then transitioning your eyes and then the gun, firing 2 shots, transitioning your eyes and then the gun. If all of us did that all the time, we would be effing amazing. The problem is that we either leave the dot early or we pick up the dot or we decide to shoot the dot early or late. And so that's what happens. We're either dragging rounds off the targets or not settling the gun or driving the gun to the next target instead of letting our vision take it there. So I would work on those things. I think both of those, like you can set yourself back $80 in books and have a new understanding for when you're ready to get back at it again.
Yeah. No, it sounds good, man. I like that.
And then buy gun parts. Buy gun parts that you're going to strip out of the gun and put back to default setting because none of them work anyway. That's another thing you can do. It's what everyone loves to do. I'm going to put this in my gun. It doesn't work. I'm going to put this in my gun. It doesn't work. It causes a problem. I'm going to spend $77 on trying to solve this problem I just caused by putting this other part in there. Let's do that.
That's why we all have these fantastic boxes of parts of random crap that doesn't work anymore.
Why would you even have that? You just ask John Bautista, hey, does this work? And he says, I've already bought 15 copies of it and it doesn't.
Actually, what this is, so this is my CZ parts box, and I have like 20 or 30 return springs, a bunch of magazine springs. I basically have every single part that you could want, every single replaceable part that you could want just for the Shadow 2s in that box. And so like every single time I go to like Steger Pro Shop or Cajun Gun Works, any of those places, I buy whatever it is I need, usually just like tape, random things like that. But then I'm always just buying extra stuff. I buy extra springs, extra everything. And so I now have a box just filled with that stuff because inevitably somebody's going to need it. And for some reason around Utah, I'm known as the CZ guy.
Well, yeah, because you've convinced everyone to get a broken gun just like you, and so like
all I'm saying
come to
is, do you know who's considering going over to the CZ? That's right, the Walkies.
Wait, they're seriously thinking about moving away from the SIGs?
Yes. Why?
Because
they're so good. Everybody loves a Shadow 2.
I mean, they only shot Glocks for years and didn't have any problems. I mean, why not move?
Because at Carry Optics Nationals, they saw how many people were shooting Shadow 2s.
Okay.
They're smart.
And then they actually shot them, and they're like, yeah, these guns actually are really good.
I don't.
Tom's
they'll
like,
switch back. I don't get this. I don't get it.
Off this planet.
Oh God, that hurts.
I do want off this planet. Like, what? You just get a stock gun, put a dot on it, shoot that thing. Like, we literally had the conversation like 2 weeks ago when we sat there and shot the Glock match. How Robert was just like, this thing is great. It does everything. It returns fine. It does everything. This isn't that big of a deal. And then it's just like,
it's funny. It's just funny. Like everybody's like, I'm gonna get a Shadow 2. I'm like, cool. Let me know. I've got parts.
Something that freaking works. Put a dot on it.
Well, that was the thing. All you need. My friend Coco, he's like, hey, you know how we traded and I've got your old Gen 4 gun? I'm like, yeah. He's like, I'm thinking of selling it. You want it back? And there's a part of me that's like, I had very good memories with that Gen 4. It was the most accurate Glock I ever owned. But now I'm just sitting here and I'm like, if I was to buy another Glock, I don't know why I wouldn't buy a Gen 5. Because the Gen 5 is actually a much more accurate gun than the 4s were.
You're really just waiting for when Glock redesigns everything, when Gaston Glock finally kicks off this mortal coil and they redesign it.
Put a hammer on the back with a proper decocker.
I am waiting for the 1911 Glock.
I would say, 2017, we're going to be 2023 here, so 2024. So they basically, by 2027, we'll start seeing a Gen 6. About every 10 years is when they release a new generation on it. The Gen 5s are freaking laser beams.
They really are. They're good guns.
But direct mill.
I know that's actually pretty. That is
direct mill is still a pretty good thing, because you don't have to wonder what kind of shoddy things happen underneath this plate. Like it's always, it's like, are you sick? Do you have some sort of disease that's going to kill you? You don't know, because you can't look inside your skin.
To be really honest with you, I mean, if I was going to buy a gun that had a plate system, I would not even consider using any plate unless it was made by Jason Keyes, because his plates are the only ones I've ever used that have been 100% flawless. Yeah. They work every single time. I've never had trouble with them. They just work.
Well, machine
every single plate system that has ever been out for the Shadow 2. I own a bunch of them still. Nothing has been as good as Jason's. Period.
And I'll probably switch.
My biggest endorsement for Jason's system.
And then when I have to switch to something like a 507 comp on this thing, I'll be moving over to that plate. We'll see. We'll see how long this nice aluminum, mostly machined properly. I think you can still see like a slight gap behind the plate and the thing. So whatever. What are you going to do? What are you going to do? You're going to sit here and 13 days. We're going to have voting's going to start. 31 days after the voting start, the voting's going to end, and we're going to see how it all shakes out. And so hopefully, whatever you do, cast your vote. Cast your vote, and we'll see how it shakes out. And
unless you're going to vote for Russell Fortney, and then don't vote.
You have to. Listen. YeeMin Lin's sitting right here, and I'm telling you, 100%, you have to vote for Ben Perry. That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. Anyways, I just hit my mic. For Robert Wyatt, YeeMin Lin, I'm Tom Nelson. Bidding you peace, love, and souls. We depart into the open waters of the sea of life on a little tugboat we like to call the PARAcast.
Good night, everybody.
For the rebellion.
For the rebellion.